Hey, what's up guys? This is Paul from the sysadmin channel, and in this video I'm going to show you step by step how to install software updates using SCCM, and we're starting right now. Alright, so here I am in my WSUS server. This is going to have the WSUS role installed. So first things first, I'll go ahead and click the add roles and features to install the role. We'll go ahead and select next to this. And here we'll go ahead and scroll down just a little bit and we'll check the Windows Update Services role. We'll go ahead and select the default features, click add on there. Select next to this, and we're not going to add any additional features, so we'll click next to that. Okay. Right here we're going to want to select the database. We never want to use the WID, so we'll select that. Here I am going to select the path for my WSUS downloads, and here I've already have a preset to 172.16.10.50 WSUS, and that's a shared folder that I created earlier. Okay, here I'm going to select the SQL database to where I want the SQL to be installed, and I have a SQL 01 server, so I'll check that. And here we'll go ahead and leave the defaults again. I'm not going to need anything after that. So once all that looks good, we'll go ahead and click install to fire it off. All right, we'll go ahead and close that. That looks good. Next, we're going to want to configure the database. So instead of clicking the little triangle on top to do the post installation, we'll go to the start menu and select Windows Server Update Services. It's going to start the DB instance and it should be preset already. So we'll go ahead and click run. This might take a few minutes, so I'll go ahead and fast forward that just so we can speed up time. All right, that finished, so we'll go ahead and close this. Next up is the wizard. And just before we start the wizard, I want to go into my SQL server. And we just want to make sure that on the databases, you see the susdb. That is the Windows Update Services database. So that looks good. Back into our WSUS server. We'll continue with the wizard. And here we're presented with the join the update improvement program. We'll go ahead and uncheck that and click next. Next up, we're prompted with the option to synchronize with Microsoft updates. We'll go ahead and leave that selected. And here we have the option to use a proxy server when synchronizing. In my case, since I am not using a proxy server, I'll go ahead and leave that unchecked and click next. And here we're going to download update information from Microsoft. Once you click on the start connecting, it's probably going to take around 45 minutes to finish. I'll go ahead and speed this up so we can continue. We'll click next to that, and here we can have the option to check any languages. Since I'm only interested in English, I'll leave that checked. We'll click next to this. And for the products, we're only interested in the operating system, so we'll go ahead and scroll down here until we find, actually we'll uncheck the Office. And we'll scroll down a little bit more and we'll uncheck Windows as well, just to make sure everything is good. I'm only interested right now in Server 2012 R2. That looks good. We'll go ahead and click next. And for the classifications, we'll go ahead and select the update rollups. And that's about it. We'll go ahead and click next to this. And here we want to synchronize automatically. I'm going to set my schedule to 2 a.m. every morning and set it for once a day. So that looks good, and we'll go ahead and click next to here. So we're just about at the end of our wizard here. We'll click begin initial synchronization to synchronize for the first time. And we'll go ahead and click finish to exit out of the wizard. Once that finishes, we're back into our WSUS console. I'll go ahead and expand that, and that looks good for now. So I went ahead and paused the video for a bit, and I added some Windows 7 machines, some fresh Windows 10 machines, and a 2016 server. So here I'm going back into my classifications, and I'm going to add those operating systems so we can use those for updates as well. So I'm going to add my 2016 server here, and that's about it for now. We'll go ahead and click on the classifications. I'm going to check the updates and unselect upgrades because we don't want to have upgrades installed from here. Okay, so that looks good. We'll go back into our synchronization schedule and select it to manually because SCCM is going to set the schedule on its side. Alright, so once we got that covered, we'll head back into our SCCM server and launch the SCCM console. From here, we're going to go into administration, and we just want to make sure that our client settings are set up properly. So we'll go ahead and click on client settings, the default client settings, and properties. From here, we want to go into the computer agent tab, and then we just want to make sure that we're using the new software center. So we'll just click on yes to that. Mine's already set, so that should be good. Next up, we're going to go to the software updates, and here you can select the schedule to when you want software updates to run. I have mine set to every 2 days, so that's good. I'll go ahead and leave all the other settings as the default, and we'll click OK to here. Next up on the list, we're going to add the WSUS server as a site server in SCCM. So from there, we'll click on the site configuration tab, click on sites, and then on my site one, I'll click on create a new site system server. We'll go ahead and click the browse, and from here, we're just going to input our pack WSUS 01. Click OK to that. Since I only have one site in my environment, I'll leave that as the default, and I'll also leave the default of the use the site system's computer account to install the system. We'll go ahead and click next to here, and from here we don't have any proxies again, so we'll click next to that. And for the role, we're definitely going to want to install the software update point, since that is the role that installs the updates. And from here, we're going to select the radio button for ports 8530 and 8531. That is the default port for WSUS for server 2012 and above. If you're using server 2008, you'd want to leave the first radio option. I'm also going to leave the default of allow intranet only client connections because I don't want any internet clients, so we'll go ahead and click next to that. If you had a specified service account to connect to the WSUS server, you can enter that here. Since I'm using my system account, there is no need for that. Since this is the first and only WSUS server in my environment, I'll go ahead and sync to Microsoft itself. If you had any additional WSUS servers, you want to make sure that one of them is a downstream, and that downstream would be synced up to the primary WSUS server. I'm not interested in creating any reports, so I'll go ahead and leave the default there and click next. Next up, we're back in our synchronization settings, so we'll go ahead and check the box to enable synchronizations on a schedule. We'll want to set our schedule to every 1 day, and then for the time, we're going to leave it as the same as last time, and that was at 2 a.m. So we'll go ahead and select that. Once we're all good with that, we'll go ahead and click OK, and then we'll click next to here. Alright, now we're giving the option to either expire superseded updates immediately or let them hang around for several months. In my case, I'm going to want to expire them immediately, so that way when new updates come up and they supersede the old ones, we won't be installing those. I'm also going to select the checkbox to run the WSUS cleanup wizard, so that way it leaves things nice and tidy. We'll click next to here. And then we'll go ahead and leave the defaults for the download full files for all approved updates. That looks good. And for the classifications, we'll go ahead and select critical updates and updates. That looks good right there. We'll click next. And then here on the products, I'm going to go ahead and check all products and uncheck it just to make sure that we remove everything. And then we'll go ahead and scroll down to Windows. And like I said, I'm only interested in some operating systems, so we'll select Windows 7 right now and Windows Server 2012. Once SCCM does an initial sync, it should download the latest catalog, so that way Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows 2016, and Windows 10 should show up. So we can just wait for that initial sync for the rest of those operating systems to show. Here I'm only interested in English, so I'm going to go ahead and deselect the rest of those languages, and we'll go ahead and click next to there. And we'll click next one more time so we can finish the wizard. It looks like everything completed successfully, so that is good. We'll go ahead and close this. So after the site server has completed successfully, we'll want to go into the start menu, and we just want to check to see that Windows Server Update Services role is installed on the machine itself. If it's not, we'll go ahead and open up a PowerShell window as an administrator, and we'll go ahead and just type in this command so we can install the role. I ran into problems where if the role wasn't installed, there was issues downloading updates. So we just want to make sure that that's there. Once it's there, we'll go ahead and move on. So now we'll go into the hierarchy configuration. We just want to check the boundary groups. In my case, it is a US. And once that's open, we'll go ahead and click on references. We want to make sure that the site assignment is checked for our site. And we also want to make sure that the WSUS server is added as a site server. Once that is done, we'll go ahead and click out of there. And then we want to go into the site configuration, servers, and site system roles, and we just want to make sure that the WSUS server is added as a site server. So that is all looking good, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sync the software updates for SCCM. So I'll go ahead and click on the software library, and then we want to right-click all software updates and synchronize software updates. We'll click yes to that. And I'm going to go ahead and pause recording so we can let the updates finish, and we'll come back. So now that the updates have finished, we'll go ahead and go into the monitoring. And then we just want to make sure that the site status is all green, and look at that sweet smell of perfection. Everything is green on there, and on the component status, we just want to make sure that everything is good as well. We're not getting any errors. You're specifically looking for the SMS WSUS roles. So we just want to make sure that everything is good on there. The next thing we're going to want to do is scroll down on the left for the software update point synchronization status. And here we just want to make sure that the synchronization source is set to Microsoft and that it actually completed successfully. Well, you can see here that my last catalog update was on 7.3. So that looks good. So now on to the meat and potatoes of this demo. Next, we're going to click on the software library, and we're going to want to set up the software update group so we can deploy that to previous years. You can see here that I have 1,041 updates downloaded so far, or as you are synced so far. And here I'm going to do a little customization of the columns just so we have a little better insight on what our data is. So I'm going to add the date released so we can see when it was released. I'm also going to add expired, and I want to add superseded. This just lets us know that we do not want any expired updates and we do not want any superseded updates. So right off the bat, we can see that that's there. Next, I'm going to add the criteria. We'll select date release. And then we want to make sure that it is between. And for the first date, we'll set it for January 1st, 2017. And for the second date, we'll set it for December 31st, 2017. So this will give us a view of all updates that were released in 2017. So next we'll set required. We'll also set expired. And then we also want to set superseded. We'll click add to that. And for require, we want to make sure that it is greater than or equal to at least 1. That way, if a computer does not require the update, it will not download it. For expired and superseded, we do not want that, so we'll select no on those. And then we'll add product. And for the product, since I'm interested in Windows 10 and Windows 7, I'll select those options. So I'll select Windows 7 first. And then I'll select the product again. And here I just want to make sure that Windows 10 is selected. So all in all, we just want to make sure that the dates are in 2017. It is required by at least 1 machine. Expired and superseded are selected as no. And the products are Windows 7 and Windows 10. We'll go ahead and click on the search, and we should get a big fat nope right now. That looks about right, but we'll go ahead and save this search because we're going to use it later. I'll go ahead and name it Windows Updates for Clients by Year, since we're going to be using this for all previous years. So now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and go into assets and compliance, and we're going to create collections for our software update groups. I like to create a folder for Windows updates just so I can keep all my device collections in there. And then once we're in the Windows updates, we'll go ahead and click on create device collection. And then here we want to name this servers-all. This will be all my servers for my environment. And I'll limit the collection to all servers. I'll go ahead and click on the add rule, and I'm going to include the collection all servers that I previously created. You can create this any way you want, but for me particularly, I like to have specific collections for specific groups or for specific functions. So now that that's done, we'll create a device collection for our servers test group. So I'll go ahead and name this servers-test group, and then we'll limit the collection to all servers as well. We'll click OK to that. And here I'm just going to pretty much do a next because I'm going to add those as a direct rule. So now on to our workstations. I'm going to create a workstations-all collection group. And we're going to limit this collection to all workstations just like we did with the servers. We'll go ahead and click next to that. And here I'm going to do the same thing to add a rule to include the all workstations collection. So that looks good. We'll go ahead and next on that, close that. And then we'll create one final group for our workstations-test group. That's what I'll name it. Workstations-test group. And again, we'll limit the collection to all workstations. And we won't set any rules because we want to have it as a direct rule. So that looks good. So now that we created those test groups, we need to add devices to those groups. So I'll first start with my servers test group and add a resource. And here I'm just going to add two servers, two file servers that I have in my lab, FSO1 and FSO2. Okay, and then we'll go back into the Windows Updates folder, and then we'll add devices for the workstation test group. So I'll do the same thing. I'll add my Windows 7 and Windows 10 machines. I'll only add one actually, so one Windows 7 and one Windows 10. And we can just do that by searching for those. So once we got all that completed, we'll go ahead and do a refresh, and those two machines or four machines should be populated by now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into our software library, and we should have the criteria populated already. So I'll go back into my saved searches and I'll click on the Windows Updates for client by year. And now, as you can see, there are several updates for 2017. I'll go ahead and select all of these. And then here I'm just going to create a software update group. I'm going to name my update group Windows Updates for Workstations-2017. So now that we have 2017 out of the way, we're going to go ahead and search between January 1st, 2016 and December 31st, 2016. We're basically going to do the same thing by selecting all of these and creating a new software group for those. And here I'm going to name it the same as we did before, but just with 2016. I'm going to do the same for 2015 and below. So I will pause recording in a bit and we will come back. So I went ahead and completed all software update groups for the previous years. So for workstations, it went back to 2011, and for servers, it went back to 2014. So the next thing we're going to do is go back into administration, and we want to look at our restart times. So we'll click on the properties of the default client settings. And if we go to computer restart, we can see that the default is 90 minutes and 15 minutes after forced. So what we want to do now is we want to create custom groups for our test groups. That way the restart time is longer than the default. So I'll go ahead and create a new group or a new device, client device settings, and I'll name it 8-hour restart window. And for our restart time, I'm going to go ahead and set it for 480. that is equivalent to 8 hours. And for the force time, we're going to want to set that to 30 minutes. This just means that once this time has passed, they will not be able to hide that setting. So that looks good. So now that we created that, we're going to go ahead and deploy it to our collection that we created. So in my case, it's going to be in the Windows Updates folder. And then here I'm going to select the workstations test group. That way those two machines do not get the default 90-minute restart time. So once that's done, we're going to go back into our assets and compliance and create maintenance windows. So we'll start off with the workstations all collection group. We'll go ahead and click on properties. And then here we're going to want to click on the maintenance window tab. We're going to want to create a new maintenance window, and we'll name this 8-hour maint window. That looks good. The start time is going to be set to 10 p.m. and the end time to 6 a.m. That should give us 8 hours. We'll go ahead and set the schedule to once daily, and we'll apply this only to software updates. So once that is set, we'll go ahead and click OK to that. And then we'll click OK once more to close out of this. So now that we set up the maintenance windows and the restart times, we're going to want to deploy those software update groups. So we'll go back into software library and we'll start off with the oldest year first. So in my case, it's 2011. We'll want to deploy that. And here I'm going to copy the software update group name to the deployment name. That'll give me a pretty good idea of what exactly it is. And for the collection, I'm going to set this to all workstations, just because these updates are old and they've already been validated, so there's no need to worry about testing them. Next up, we're given the option to select the type of deployment. In my case, I'm going to set everything to required because I want these old updates to automatically download and install for these machines. And now for the schedule configuration, we'll go ahead and set it to local time. We want to deploy these old updates as soon as possible, and we'll click next. So for the user notifications, we do want to show all notifications. Personally, that's the way I like it, so users are notified once updates are deployed. Since these are really old updates, I want to install these updates outside of the maintenance windows. This is my preference, so you can obviously change it at your convenience. And then finally, we're going to select the last option to do an evaluation cycle after a restart. This just lets us get compliance data faster. Here, if you wanted to set up any alerts, you can do that now. In my case, I don't really care for it, so I will leave the default. And here for the download settings, I'm just going to select the option to download from Microsoft itself if the updates are not found on any neighbors or distribution points. Since we haven't created any deployment packages, we're defaulted to creating a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and name this the same as our software update group. And for the package source, we'll go ahead and select that WSUS folder we created earlier. I have specific folders for each year, so that looks good. Next up, we'll go ahead and add our distribution point. I only have one in my environment, so that's the only one I'll select. We'll click next to there, and we want to download software updates from the internet. And just like before, I'm only interested in English, so I will leave that selected. So once we get to the settings confirmation, we're going to want to save all of these options as a template. And we'll go ahead and name this template the same as our software update group. So once that's done, we'll go ahead and give it one final look over and click next. And now we should be downloading all of the updates to our machine that we set. I'll go ahead and fast forward this for time's sake. So everything completed successfully. That looks good. We'll go ahead and close this. So now we want to use that template we created for the following years. So I'll go ahead and right click on the 2012 software update group and click deploy. We're going to follow suit and copy the software update name and set it as the deployment name, just like what we did before. And this time, instead of selecting the collection, we're going to select the template and select the template we just set up. So now all of our settings should be pre-populated. So we'll go ahead and click next to here. The only thing you do have to change though is set the time to as soon as possible. And then we also want to set the option to run the evaluation cycle after the restart. Those are the only two things that change. Aside from that, all of our settings should stay the same. So we can pretty much just next through this really quickly. For our deployment package, we are going to set this to 2012. And I already have a 2012 folder created for our downloads. So we'll go ahead and click next to here. We'll add the distribution point once again. And we'll download the settings from the internet. Once again, this is pretty much review. We just did this a couple minutes ago. So we can pretty much fly by this right now. So those downloaded successfully. I'll go ahead and close this really quick. And then I'll hop on to my Windows 7 machine so we can see the software updates that we just deployed. So on my Windows 7 machine, I'll open up the Software Center. And then we'll click on the updates so we can see the updates flowing in. So I'll go ahead and move this a little bit to the side so we can see it. And then we'll click on the Start menu, Control Panel. And from here, we'll click on Configuration Manager, Actions. And we want to do a manual sync. So I'll go ahead and minimize the control panel. And then once the machine policy and retrieval evaluation cycle is highlighted, we'll click Run Now. And then we'll also click the software updates deployment evaluation cycle and the software updates scan cycle. So once we have all those running, we should see updates flowing in fairly quickly. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and look at the logs. So we'll navigate to our C drive, Windows, SCCM, logs, and we're looking at the updates store log first. This log will let us know which updates are installed and which updates are missing. So we'll open that up with CMtrace, and you can see that there are several updates that are not installed, or some of them are missing. So we should see those missing updates flowing in pretty soon. So there is our notification that we set, and the software update that it's currently waiting to install is our .NET Framework 3.51. It looks like there are more update statuses coming in, so we should see more software updates coming in our console. I'll go ahead and click back on Software Center, and it looks like there are seven software updates that are pending installation. And I'll go ahead and pause recording so I can show you what it looks like when it's pending a restart from Software Center. So we can see that the box is showing up on the bottom right corner, and that's set by the custom device settings that we set earlier. You'll also notice that since there is less than 30 minutes remaining, the hide button is grayed out. So our only option here is just to restart the machine. So I went ahead and paused recording and deployed all of my software updates by year up to 2017. And you can see here that everything is 100% compliant for my workstations. So now I'm going to go back into my software updates. We're going to go ahead and click on our save searches, and we're going to click on the software updates for clients by year. So in this case, since we're in the month of July of 2018, I'm going to set it to June 1st to June 30th. We're going to select all of those updates just like we did before. We're going to create a new software update group, and we're going to name it the same, just with 06 at the end. I'm going to do the same thing for May going back to January of 2018, and then I'll pause recording and come back once we're done. All right, so I just finished up those months, and now we can move on to our automatic deployment rules. So on the left-hand side, we'll go ahead and click on that, and then we want to create a new automatic deployment rule. So for the name, we're going to go ahead and follow suit with Windows updates for workstations. For the template, we're going to want to select Patch Tuesday. That's the second Tuesday of every month. And for the collection, we'll go ahead and set the Windows updates, our test group. We'll click OK to that. We also want to make sure that create a new software update group is selected. And we want to enable this deployment after the rule is run. So on here, I don't care too much on the success or error messages. So I'll leave that as default. We'll click next. And then here, I'm going to select the property filters. I'm going to start off with the date released. I'm going to set this to 1 month. So that looks good. And then we want to move on to our update classification. So I'll click on the critical updates, service packs, update rollups, and updates. I do not want to select upgrades, so that looks good. I'll click OK to that. And next we're going to want to select the product for our operating system. So I'll click on product, and then I'll go ahead and scroll down for Windows 10 and then Windows 7, since those are the only operating systems for clients that I'm using at the moment. We'll click OK. So after we selected our clients, we're going to want to click on the superseded, just to make sure that we're not installing or downloading any superseded updates. So we'll select no on that. And now we'll go ahead and click on title, just to make sure that we're not downloading any previews for future updates. So we'll select minus preview and click add. That looks good. And then we'll go ahead and click on the preview just to make sure that we are getting all of our updates that are valid. So right here I see that their quality updates are good. We got some cumulative updates, some security updates. So far everything's looking good. We'll go ahead and close that. And then we'll click next, and we want to run this on a schedule. So we'll select customize. And then we're going to click on monthly to set it on a monthly basis. And then we'll select the the second Wednesday of every month. For the time, we'll set it to 5 a.m. Once we have that entered, we can click OK. And then we'll click next once more to continue on. All right, and now for the configure schedule details, we'll go ahead and set it to the client local time because we want it to run at their schedule. I also wanted to set the time as soon as possible, and the deadline I also want to set as soon as possible. That looks good, so I'll go ahead and click next to here. And for the experience, I do want it to show in Software Center. I want them to get that notification. I also want it to install outside of the maintenance windows, just for this case. And everything else looks, actually we do want to run the evaluation after the restart, so we'll click that. And now for the software update alert, I went ahead and set a rule to notify me if at least 90% of it was not completed within 7 days. So that looks good. We'll go ahead and click next to there. And for the download updates behavior, I went ahead and set the two options to download updates from a distribution point and install. And I also set it to allow the clients to share with other clients on the same subnet. I also went ahead and set the option to download from Microsoft directly if it's not found on any neighbors or boundary groups. That looks good, so we'll click next to there. All right, on here, since I already have a 2018 package created, I'll go ahead and select that. That looks good. And then nothing else is needed on this set, so we can click next. All right, and I also want to download directly from the internet since this is my primary WSUS server. Next up is our options to choose which languages we want to have. In my case, I'm only interested in English, so I'll click next to there. And we'll confirm the settings once more, and if you wanted to, you can save this as a template, but in my case, that's not needed, so I will create the package and move on. And that looked like it completed successfully. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to add another deployment. So we'll right click on our ADR deployment that we just created a second ago. And for the collection, we'll choose the all workstations group. So I'll choose the Windows Updates folder, and then I'll select that all workstations group. We want to make sure that the rule is enabled after it's run. So we'll go ahead and leave that checked. I'm not too interested in the error message, so we'll move on with that. And once again, we want to configure our deployment schedule, so we'll base it off their local time. We want to make the deployment available as soon as possible so they can download it or install it before the deadline. And for the deadline, we want to set it out 14 days after the initial availability. So this should give us enough time to either catch broken updates or fix anything or disable it once if we find any problems with that. So that all looks good. We'll go ahead and click next to here. And next up for the user experience, I do want to display all notifications in Software Center. That way users are notified once the updates are sent to their computer. I also want to leave the software update installation and the restart left only for maintenance windows. That way it doesn't restart in the middle of the day while they're working. And finally, I do want to run an evaluation cycle after the restart. This will give us a better understanding of their compliance data. So that all looks good. We'll go ahead and click next to here. Next up, for the deployment alerts, I do want to get notified if at least 80% is not compliant within the next 7 days. So I'll go ahead and set those options and move on. And now back onto our software update download behavior. I'm going to select the option to download software updates from a distribution point and install, just like we did before. I also want to download and share content with other clients within the same subnet. And finally, I do want to have it download directly from Microsoft if it's not found on any distribution points or any boundary groups. So that all looks good. We'll go ahead and click next to here. Finally, we'll go ahead and confirm the settings and make sure that's successful, and that looks like it was. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to run this ADR. So I'm going to go ahead and right click that and then select run now. And while that's running in the background, I'm going to open up the logs. And specifically, we're looking for the ruleegnine.log. And here you can find all of the packages that the ADR is downloading right now. So you can see that I'm downloading several packages at the moment. So after you had a look at that, go ahead and minimize that. And the next thing we're going to do from here is we're going to go into our Windows 7 machine. And we can see shortly here that our packages are going to be flowing in. Our updates are going to be flowing in. So in order to speed up the process on that sync cycle, I'm going to open up the control panel, go to Configuration Manager, select the Actions tab, and we want to rerun the machine policy retrieval cycle and the software updates deployment cycle, as well as the software updates scan cycle. So once that has all been done, we want to go into our logs and we want to make sure we're looking at the updates deployment log. And then we want to make sure that we're going to open up the updates store log. So here on the updates deployment log, it's just letting us know which ones are available. For the updates store log, it's going to let us know which updates are missing and which ones are currently installed. So it'll give us a good insight as to which ones are needed. So since we ran that sync cycle just seconds ago, updates should be coming in right now. Actually, there they are. So there you can see our notification did pop up. And there are several updates that are now being pending for this machine. Since I did set these software updates to be installed during the maintenance windows, that's when you can expect them to be installed automatically. So that about wraps it up for today's video. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Or if you have any ideas on other SCCM or sysadmin related videos, go ahead and let me know in the comments as well. Until next time, this is Paul with the Sysadmin channel, signing out.